How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have got a very special guest for you. Today, I'm joined by a nutritionist and strength and conditioning coach. Today, I am joined by the one and only Aidan Mackey. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Very
Uh,
well.
Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. What's been happening in your world? What have you been up to recently?
Um, Trying to keep up, really, Stephen. It's been busy the last while. Um, since Christmas, I took on a member of staff, Paddy Quinlan, and we've been working away, and um, I've been trying to get him um, get work put his way, and I opened up some spaces like last month and this month. So it's been flat out. So very good this end. So yeah, and then we have a little project in the pipeline as well, which we're trying to organize too. So it's good. It's good right now. I can't complain.
Oh, nice. And then we've obviously, the last year or so has been, I've probably mentioned it or spoken about it to with quite a lot of coaches, but especially the last year or so being, quite a strange one, and people being able to adapt and change to the pandemic with gyms opening and closing and all that sort of stuff. How have you found sort of the last year? Is there anything that you've changed, or how have you adapted to the last year or so?
Um, so it's been a funny year for me, is like as well, because I came home from Melbourne last June. I was over there for 9 months or so. So my Australian dream was cut short a bit. So I had to come home, and I was a bit actually concerned before I came home, because I had been working this kind of random job, and I was a little bit concerned at that point. Would I be any good at my actual job again?
Yeah.
But as soon as I came back, work started to pick, pick up again, and then I was back into our the gym that I worked at as well, CSP. Um, so it was all good. It was all good. But I suppose now, more so, I have tried to make the human interaction element of the online service that little bit better. I suppose that's the main thing over the last 6 months, 9 months, I'd say. I've really tried to focus on that, and because now new nutrition is my main thing, and I'm actually not working in the gym anymore. I'm really trying to get as much out of this as I can for my clients, um, because I used to do co- consults face to face and stuff, and that was obviously a huge help, because you have that human element. And now I still do consults face to face on Zoom, but it's that coaching element of it, which can go amiss online, as you know. And it's actually something that people are a little bit wary of. They're a little bit afraid of. Um, Pardon me. So that's something that I'm trying to cover as
Yeah.
much as I can.
I especially think with the because a lot of things now I've gone online. I like what you said there about having the consult, and being able to speak in person. Sometimes, it is quite hard to put that across over a Zoom chat, but being able to still build that relationship and have a little bit of a chat, because I know I much prefer Zoom conversations like what we're having now, one on one. At least it feels a little bit more human, if you like, rather than I know we've had with the gym that I'm working at, we've had online classes with up to 30 people in, and if they're all on mute and everything, it's quite hard to build a relationship with those. So yeah, I think definitely having that, because one of the biggest things I've done is using voice notes a lot more, on WhatsApp
Yes.
or Messenger or anything, and it just feels a little bit more like you're having a conversation rather than, you know, never knowing, it might sound daft, but never knowing what that person sounds like and just sending texts and not really knowing what's happening. So yeah, it's good. You know, I think it's been a little bit of a strange year for everybody, but it's good to see and hear how people have like changed and adapted and still trying to, because the biggest thing I think is, whenever you're working as a coach and, you know, working with clients, is offering them value, and, you know, seeing that usually they'd be able to come into the gym and see you, whereas having it online, you still need to be there, port of call, and know that you're there for them to help them.
Exactly. That voice note element is huge. I find I often warn warn clients that when they're signing up with me, that while they might send a voice note talking me through their week and how it went, that they might expect a podcast back from me, you know, because all of a sudden you get this kind of stream of consciousness just coming out, and you're like, oh, that's 20 minutes gone there.
Yeah. I think it's good though, because, you know, especially once you start talking and building a relationship with clients, I think that's good. I think it's, you know, then as well, because the biggest thing, you know, on the topic of the podcast as well, that's why I, you know, stuck with the name Strength Chat, because, you know, it's a little bit of a conversation, and you get to know, and especially working with clients, you get to know people's personalities, and, you know, you can have a little bit more of a conversation, which is really good. So obviously, you've mentioned, because obviously you're over in Australia and worked a little bit with JPS Health and Health and Fitness. But for everyone listening who might not know your background, how you got involved in coaching, and your background in your nutrition and sort of strength and conditioning background, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Yeah, so I finished school and went, and like a lot of others, went and did like a course in personal training and sports massage therapy and gym instruction, and did all the step aerobics stuff and all that. But it was only in my second year of doing that I thought, oh, I actually maybe should have gone to uni or real college. First of all, right out of school. So in my third year, I so 3 years of PT and sports therapy, like it's a lot, and it's a bit of a waste, to be honest. But anyway, it was in my third year that I realized, oh, I actually want to go to like real college here. So I went and did. So I worked hard, got everything that I needed out of that, and I went and did sports strength and conditioning in LIT Limerick. That was a 4-year level 8 course. In my first year of doing that, I got chatting a little bit to Martin McDonald, and he said that he had something in the pipeline. That thing turned out to be MNU. So I put myself through that in my second year of college, alongside actual college, and then so that leads me up to, I suppose, I did a little bit of one-to-one nutrition when I got a job in CSP here in Ireland, and that's where it all started for me, really, because that gave me the opportunity that I needed to work with people one-on-one, get all that experience, and that, like, CSP was the makings of me, really. So I have a lot to thank them to thank Alan from CSP for, but I started to work with CrossFit athletes one-to-one, and I started to work with, obviously, general pop one-to-one in there, and I got some results, and then the word started to spread, and that kind of leads me to where I am now. I went away after I graduated from SNC for for what was supposed to be a year, I got chatting to Jacob Skepis from JPS, and he kindly let me do some work over there with them. I obviously had to come home early from there because of COVID, and since then I've been working kind of out on my own for this year. Really, I've started more so going out on my own now. So
Yeah.
that's me. That's
Cool.
kind of my story.
Especially with having followed Martin McDonald and Jacob Skeppers and JPS Health and Fitness, how much of an influence were sort of those two sort of on your coaching, especially from the Martin McDonald side of things? Because I have heard a couple of people do the like the Mackey University, because it's like a year. Is it a year long course? Course that the nutrition side of things, and then obviously the JPS Health and Fitness, the content that those guys put out there, and the seminars that they put on. How much of an influence did sort of those two have on maybe molding your coaching style or philosophies or anything like that?
Yeah, Martin for me is one of the biggest influences. It's kind of I have a way of thinking now that I'm like, if I'm a little bit like stuck on how, if I'm not really sure about something, I kind of remember those "What would Jesus do?"
Yeah.
bracelets. It's a bit like, what would Martin do?
Yeah.
Kind of have that. I'm like, what's a good way of thinking about this now? So I would. That's kind of what Martin offers you. It's this kind of critical mindset. So Martin's been absolutely huge, and I always, not, I regularly message him to let him know how things are, But the guys over at JPS are unreal.
Yeah.
Like that was a really cool experience to be on the floor with them, seeing how they coach, seeing how they think about things, and the scientific and practical way that they think about their training. So the training side of things over there was really good for me to see, because I always loved personal training, and I loved the muscle gain and the strength side of things. So to be on the floor there, seeing that done really, really well, in a one-to-one setting. I mean, obviously I've been doing group stuff a lot, and I had personal trained and that kind of thing, but seeing it done really well on a one-to-one setting was excellent. And shout out to Jacob and Sam and everyone out there.
Yeah, definitely. I always like to ask that, because especially seeing people's influences, and I know exactly what you mean. You when you learn from and have like mentors and people that you've learned from, sometimes it is that case of, right, well, what would they do in this situation? And it makes you think, it just nudges you back on track sometimes as a coach, because sometimes you might get thrown a couple of curveballs, or you might forget things, and it's just making sure it's getting reminded. And as well, when you mentioned about JPS over there, and seeing how other gyms and other systems work, sometimes you think, oh yeah, that's a really good way of doing things, and coaching as an art, and how they run things is really good. Diving into the topics that I sent over then, and on the topic of, I saw Martin McDonald share obviously one of your posts, and that's what we were building some of the topics on, and the post was obviously around BMI and anorexia nervosa. Just want to give a little bit of a background and information just on that, and what your thoughts were surrounding the post.
Yeah. So the post was a personal kind of story about my sister and the situation that she experienced, and that we don't want others to go through that same experience. And we know it's still happening every day. So my sister had anorexia nervosa and mixed. So you'll have people that have um, a couple of eating disorders, you know. So it's not just that you have the one thing. You can have one, and then you might have bulimia as well, or you know, there's mixes of them. Um, so anyway, she was not of an appropriate BMI to be classed as needing treatment for anorexia nervosa when we I say we, I was only young, but I'll say we anyway, as a family, tried to get treatment for her. So it's basically like being turned away because you're not skinny enough, you're not
Yeah.
close enough to dying in order to be able to find treatment, which is like mind blowing. Really, it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense because like the the seeds of the mental disorder have been planted well and truly. They are growing, and the mental aspect of it, which it is a mental health issue. So if you are continuing to like if you have a mental health issue that is getting worse and worse and worse, that needs to be that needs to be treated, no matter what the physical manifestations of that are.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely key to what the post was about. And I used like examples such as if someone was suicidal, you wouldn't wait for them to finally throw themselves off a bridge before you helped them. Or if
Yeah.
someone was self-harming, you wouldn't wait until they cut themselves 19 times before they get
Yeah.
get help. You
Yeah.
know, if those signs are showing, they need help.
Yeah.
So we started a petition, pardon me, to get BMI taken off the main criteria in the NHS and HSE standards for diagnosing anorexia.
Yeah.
So that's the aim of it, really.
Yeah.
There are other petitions out there that have done the same thing. They have gotten way more traction than our one. There's ones out there with thousands and thousands of um, signatures on it. And in terms of the NHS or in the UK, like this it has gone to Parliament as far as I know,
Right.
but it hasn't been acted on.
Yeah.
It's actually in the NICE guidelines as well that the BMI shouldn't be used as the main criteria, yet it's still being acted out.
Yeah.
So something really has to change in that regard.
Yeah, definitely, and especially when I read I read the post and realizing that it is one of those things where you do think of it as um a physical side of things, of and focusing on nutrition, but the biggest thing is, and especially when we speak about people or speak about clients, working with food, whatever level that is, and when you mentioned about eating disorders and that sort of stuff, I think it is definitely a mindset and a mental side of things. And do you think, especially because if you're going to the hospital or working with nutritionists and that sort of stuff, do you think that the mental side of things the mental health side of things is maybe a little bit neglected when it comes to nutrition sometimes. And from your experiences with this, how has this impacted your coaching and how you deal with nutrition, if that kind of makes sense?
Yeah. Yes, I'd say for the most part, people do overlook the mental side of things. I mean, in terms of eating disorders, I like to think of that as a um, mental health disorder that has physical implications, or that has um, implications on people's relationship with food and their body. It's not. It's not. It's not really about the food. It's about what's going on in that person's head.
Yeah.
It's just that sadly that person will will take the mental health issue out on their food control and their weight control, and that's kind of it is a control thing to a certain extent. I'm certainly not an eating disorder specialist at all, but I think it's just very, very important that it's understood that it's a mental health disorder.
Yeah.
It happens to have it happens to take its effect on food and body weight. So it's a preoccupation with food and body weight, shape, and size.
Yeah.
And it's a clinical issue. Now I know from first-hand experience, um, well, I know from my sister's experience that the mental health side of things isn't looked after as best as it should, in Ireland at the time anyway. So she had to go to England to get treatment for it. So they used an approach over there that I can't remember the name of right now, but it's very much it's a holistic type of an approach. Obviously, they have to do certain things with regards, like getting these people to eat, of
Yeah.
course, because um, you don't want them to pass away under your care. So there are
Yeah.
certain things you need to do to keep these people fed. But anyway, in terms of how that how that kind of affects the way that I think about nutrition and how that has affected my coaching, I think was the second part of that.
Yeah.
Um, I guess it's like you don't really know what someone is thinking, and you don't really know um, what their relationship with food really is, and you don't want to be that person that sends someone the wrong side of an eating disorder. You don't want to be the one that, um, if they have predisposing factors before they come to you, you don't want to be the one that is um, the one that kind of keeps things ticking along,
Yeah.
that puts any unnecessary thoughts in their mind. So they could be someone that has disordered eating tendencies, and disordered eating tendencies are um, a pretty good um, what's the word? I can't think of the word. If someone has disordered eating, basically they're more likely to have an eating disorder.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's especially with it being because I always think nutrition is quite a personal thing, person to person, and people have a lot of different thoughts surrounding that. And one of the things that you said there is that you're not an eating disorder specialist or anything like that, but obviously when coaches and PTs are working with clients, nutrition is going to be an element of that, and it's going to come up in conversation, in consultations, and all that sort of stuff. What are sort of your or what have you found to be red flags that you might notice, and where sometimes you may think, actually, do you know what, I need to refer out for this, or they need to go and see a specialist? And then the second part of that would be, what would you recommend coaches or personal trainers to learn about nutrition, so that actually they've got a toolkit, they know what their scope is, but then if they spot these red flags, they can then refer on, because sometimes it'll be like, yeah, we need to eat protein, need to eat veggies, but sometimes some people might have on varying levels might have different thoughts surrounding food or issues surrounding food.
Mm. It's a good question, and what I'd say is coaches need to do a little bit of reading on what disordered eating looks like, for sure. So they also need to assess how people are thinking about their body, um, body weight, shape, size, all of these factors. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's a very, like, people can use words like binge eating, right? So if you see these kind of words come up, you do need to dig into them a little bit more, because while some people might use the word binge eating, let's say, that might just mean that they overeat, right? And
Yeah,
overeating isn't the same as binging. Um, if people use words like guilt and shame and loss of control, if people use words like um, people kind of are very, very critical of how they look and how they act as a response to eating, if they have a lot of dichotomous thinking, that you can see, right, this person really thinks that this is bad, this is good, this is right, this is wrong, um and they're looking for you to be the person that holds them accountable to this dichotomous thinking. You can begin to like sensitize your kind of senses to these kind of
yeah,
things. um So it's kind of looking at extremes, looking at keywords, and drilling into those a little bit more. That's what the consultation is a really great opportunity to do. And obviously, like, if you're doing a little bit of screening before you even get someone to that point as well, um, depending which way your service runs, but
yeah,
a little bit of screening before you get to that point where they have to do a little application form before they jump on a call or
yeah,
something in there. You should be able to have a little bit of an idea about what it is that they're looking for, and then um, get on the phone, have a chat, just be open, just ask like meaningful questions about their experience. People tend to um, people tend to let you know about how they are if they have the space to. Um, but again, it does require, for me, I suppose it it's not as if I've always been the best at this kind of thing. I'm not saying that I'm the best at it now, but it's just a constant process of thinking, oh my God, could I be doing any harm here? So
Yeah,
you look at all of the research over time, and you know, when you're starting out, you might you're in a you're probably more likely to do some harm along the way, right? It's a it's a sad truth, I think, because you're just not experienced enough to pick up on everything. But as you go along, you need to be really conscious of that. You need to be thinking, like, reflecting on, like, if you read something new about disordered eating, or if you read something new about um, normal eating, and you think, okay, that's kind of normal, that's disordered, and then you think, um, oh, well, when I worked with that person, I kind of pushed them more towards that end, and then you're like, okay, in the future, um, I'll make sure to look out for that kind of thing, and I'll approach it this way. D- d- does that make sense? It's not really for me.
yeah,
It's not
uh,
for me an exact science, but it's being person centered, and trying to figure out where that person is at
yeah.
before you go making any calls.
Yeah, definitely. I think with because when it comes to the coaching side of things, one of the things that you said there is obviously do no harm, and I think a lot of the times you can think about how you're going to do that with training in terms of, right, we need to make sure that we don't hurt the lower backs or the shoulders or the knees or anything like that. And I think sometimes, whether this is the right phrase or not, that you can feel a little bit comfortable with the training side of things and be put on, right, this is the program, right, this is going to look after your shoulders or your lower back or anything like that. But with the nutrition side of things, like what you were saying, if you read about normal eating and read about disordered eating, the language that they're using, is sometimes can put them in the position where they want to, like what you say, binge or overeat or point them in a direction that you don't want to go through. And actually, there's two sides of the coin. Yes, there's the physical harm that you can maybe do from training, but also the language that you use around nutrition, what you're recommending that they eat. Can also cause harm, and I liked what you said about, people like things to be black and white, like, right, this is good food, this is bad food. Whereas as soon as there's sort of those two aspects of it, and if they ever have the bad food, then it's like, all right, it's the end of the world, this is really bad. And then, it can go, it can have a negative effect from the mental side of things, because it's that process of thinking, oh yeah, this is bad food, so if I have this, something's going to go wrong. One thing that I did want to touch on, obviously you mentioned about, working with people who are doing strength training or CrossFit or anything like that, is how have you found eating habits and mindset around food with people who are training a little bit more? Because sometimes you can find people who are training a lot, are a little bit worried about the foods that they're eating, or for strength training, it might be around, right, well, actually, if I'm doing powerlifting or strength training or whatever it may be, I can just eat what I want, or be feeling as though they need to undereat a little bit more. What sort of your experiences and thoughts on that?
Um, so people can sometimes think that, like, athletes will be easier to work with because they're more like robots or
Yeah,
something. Um, and while partly that can be true, you there is a negative side to that, and that kind of comes back to what we just touched on there, which is this kind of um, over analyzing what it is that they eat, when really there is a lot more room as an athlete to do some things that they wouldn't really have thought about, or they wouldn't have included much of. So an athlete can get away with, having higher sugar than someone else. So I might say, okay, here's a list of things that make sense for you to eat around training, or during training, or after training. Doesn't mean that you have to have them. Doesn't mean that you can only have these if you're training, but these things can make sense, right? And it's things like jellies and like sports drinks, or refined carbohydrates, let's say. And they're like, ooh. Like all of a sudden you can have Haribo and Cocoa Pop Pops and stuff like this, and like that can come as a shock to some, because some athletes need to get in like 400, 500 grams of carbs, and good luck doing that with potatoes and legumes and stuff like that, but yeah, I suppose the thing is, and this comes back to something that you said, which I was trying to recall as I began to speak, is if you have a way of working with people, or if you have a way as a coach that makes your life easier, right? So you have templates, you have spreadsheets, you have systems. Often we want people to fit into this. Like, okay, I'm talking to this person now. I have an idea that I've worked with this person before, or I have a system for this kind of thing or this situation. This makes sense in this situation. We like that, right? Because it's easier for us. It streamlines our service, all that. But we can fall prey to that, because sometimes it actually isn't in that person's best interest, because we could be cutting a corner, and that could be a vital corner to actually looking after that person if we just want them to fit into our simple, easy system. So I suppose no matter who it is, you need to be thinking, okay, I have worked with similar people, so there is a bit of a template here, but I'm going to take this bit out because the language doesn't suit. I'm going to rephrase this. I'm going to take that whole section out. I'm going to put some fresh ideas down. I'm going to research this for that person that's in front of me. And while that is hard work on a coach's end, it's the right work. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes when I'm setting up a client, I give myself like the allotted time. Sometimes I'm sat there for much longer than that, because I just couldn't send the plan out without having done this thing, because it's just it's your conscious thinking, right? Do no harm. You need to do this for that person.
Yeah, definitely. I think when it comes to that, because especially sometimes, probably more so in maybe the maybe the CrossFit side of things and the strength side of things, you can go into any CrossFit gym and there'll be people who are competing and going to competitions, and especially with the CrossFit Games on, all of a sudden everyone wants to be a CrossFit Games person, and being able to have those carbs in or food in. But ultimately, that phrase of doing no harm for the general population, if you like, which the majority of personal trainers and coaches are going to be working with, sometimes you still need to tailor that to make sure that they are healthy, that they're not just running themselves into the ground, or following a plan that sort of isn't isn't specific to them. With that in mind, then in terms of the people around their eating habits and the mindset around food, what are sort of your go-to? Obviously, you mentioned about from the client's point of view, the language that they use. What's your sort of system, or what are your go-to language that you use when you're working with clients and you're talking about food? Because sometimes, like when we've spoken about good and bad food, there's also phrases where you should be eating this. This is what you should be doing. And exactly like what you said, I thought that was a good way of looking at it in terms of, right, well, this is going to fit, you're going to fit into my model, so this is what you should do, rather than trying to speak and work out a plan that goes together. So what are your sort of go-to, or how do you work in terms of the language that you try and use?
Um, so I like to think about things, I suppose, in terms of what the overarching plan is. So what is it that they want to get, like, at the end of this? So what is their overarching motivation? What are their values? Um, if they could see themselves in 6 months' time and forever, what would that look like? And then that's the thing that ultimately motivates them. Um, so that's, I like to kind of think about big picture stuff like that first of all, and then I kind of set things into kind of meso cycles and micro cycles. So in the meso cycle, I would be thinking, okay, for the like your macro cycle, which is the overarching plan, and it's
Yeah.
even just the way that you're thinking, like where you want to be, that's built up of a few phases or meso cycles. So I give a title to that. I'd say, I want you to be thinking about this. This is your kind of goal for this phase, and that will lead to this, right? So it's not that we are only going to be thinking in one way for the whole plan. We're thinking, okay, we might have a restrictive phase. So I might say, right, this is a fat loss focus phase, but this is leading to a maintenance phase. And so we know that there's something coming at the end,
Yeah.
and this is what we're aiming for. So I guess it's giving people the full picture first of all at the start, and we have the overarching plan, and then we have the phases. So it's not just the language, and I might change that language depending on who's in front of me. Um, but now they're getting now they're kind of their horizons have been broadened a bit because um, they can see that it's not kind of black and white. They can see that there are multiple ways of going about getting towards the end. And then under that, I have micro cycle stuff, which is the ins and outs of it. That's the day to day processes. So now they have process goals to work towards and little ideas within that. So working on their routine and structure. Within that is the structure of meals a little bit. Um, Within that is habits. Within habits itself, there could be performance habits, there could be health seeking habits. Um, and so if they have the full picture of what habits are just general health seeking ones as well, that they need to be pretty much day in, day out, these are the ones that we need to be looking at. And then I have flexibility and enjoyment in there as well. And it's like, if I could go to the micro cycle level again, that can be almost seen as enough food coming in, enough energy coming in for the goal of the phase, um, enough macros as well for the
Yeah.
goal of that phase, of course, but fuel, let's say, bigger picture stuff. And then we have routine, and then, or structure. Then we have health seeking habits, and then we have flexibility and enjoyment. And if any one of these things isn't present, something is amiss.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't have flexibility and enjoyment, that's not a life worth living. You know, so
Yeah.
I'm not doing my job if I haven't let you have that, and you're not being honest with me if you think that you can just not have that. And then the health seeking habits element of it, I'll set ones that are general, but also ones that are more appropriate to that person as well. Meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
Maybe they can't get like 3 to 4 servings of vegetables each day. Maybe they just need to have some more plant food at lunch, and that's all right for now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the structure. Can I get a little bit more structure in there? Maybe even such that it's not an erratic routine or an erratic way of eating. There's just a little bit more structure there. For some people, they need far more of that. For some others, they just need a little bit more of that. But that's the framework that I like to work within.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with that, what's the good explanation around that is that I think sometimes, you know, and I've had it before where people come in and say they want a time frame, they want to know, right, this is what we want to do. Whereas actually sometimes you need to look, and I know sometimes it is hard. I sometimes find it hard being like, right, this is the 6 month plan or the year plan, or you know, this is where we want to be. But when you're breaking it down and being like, right, because in your head as a coach, yeah, you might be planning 6 months ahead, but if you're saying, right, this is the plan that we're going to focus on for now, this is the restricted or maintenance phase or whatever you want to call it. But the good thing about that is the last point that you made in terms of the flexibility and the enjoyment. I think sometimes when it comes to food and mindset around food is that, oh, well, we shouldn't be enjoying this. We should always be on plan. We need to be doing this and doing that. Whereas actually, you know, every time we speak about food, right, if we're talking about birthdays, meal outs, Christmas, do you know what I mean? All those sort of things, you know, a lot of events are surrounding food where you can enjoy it. And there is that ability of having flexibility. However, one of the other things that you mentioned there about meeting the client where they are, I think sometimes some people can have a little bit more flexibility than other people. Sometimes people need to be a little bit more restrictive depending on what they're doing. But even still, when you're saying you're breaking it down into the layers, that level of restrictiveness, you know, might change the language that you're going to use, or you might, you know, take something out that you think, right, we are going to be restrictive, but we're just going to focus on this, focus on one thing, rather than, because I always think sometimes when people say restrictive, and you know, I had that mentality that it's like, right, you're restrictive on everything is kept to the bare minimum, whereas actually I think when it comes to being restrictive, you can pick and choose what you want to be, and what restrictive might be for one person is going to be different to the other, which has been you know, an interesting topic to think about. So the kind of the last question, if you like, from the topics that we've spoken about there, you know, talking about from a coach's point of view, being able to speak to clients, from a client's point of view, in terms of, you know, being able to be honest with the coach and allowing flexibility and, you know, being restrictive, what would be your take home points or words of wisdom?
From a coach's point of view, if you haven't developed empathy, you're not developing as a coach. So you need to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. You need to have enough of a breadth of knowledge about about how someone might be thinking in their experience, So that's not to say that that's a complete airy fairy thing. That's like that requires work. That requires looking at research. That requires looking at like knowing terms like what is a restrained eater? What does restraint look like? What's a rigid what's rigid um restraint versus flexible restraint? What is you need to be aware of what people might be thinking and experiencing. Um, and so that's one of the main things that I would say. Empathy is a bit of a skill. I think you can get better at it, and I think there are multiple ways of getting better at it. But one of the best ways is to ask questions and listen to the response, note it down, have a think about it. And the other way, well, one of the other ways I think is to keep reading and keep thinking about what does the evidence say about these things. So always assume that there might be a little bit of harm in what you might do, and
Yeah.
then be more inclined to think, oh well, I don't want to be I don't want to be doing any harm. So how do I do that? How do I protect people?
Yeah.
Well, you need to be reading up.
Yeah, definitely. I think from everything that we've said there and everything that we've spoken about, obviously it was, around the nutrition side of things, and it started off in terms of, for what we think is a physical element, and talking about BMI and that sort of stuff. We've kind of gone on to, right, in terms of coaching, sometimes it is that case of, right, actually listening to what the client's saying, trying to ask questions, so they're going to give you a little bit more information, because the biggest thing is you don't know what people are thinking. You don't know what's going on, and you could say something. I've had a prime example of it. I've spoken to people in the gym and then come back in, it's like, oh well, you said this, and this sparked off something else, and it's kind of like, right, okay. And one of the biggest things, that art of coaching, if you like, and being able to get people effective results, is listening to them. And the nutrition side of things, I completely agree. Being able to stay up to date and know these terms, so you can look, like what we mentioned in the chat, you can look and spot these sort of red flags, and then be able to help from there. So yeah, quite a few topics covered, and some questions answered, which I know has helped me in terms of picking up language and working with clients. But for everyone listening who might have any questions about what we've chatted about today, or might want to get involved in some coaching with you, where can people find you or reach out to you?
So yeah, thank you for that. They can find me on Instagram at Aidan_Mackey_health. You can go to aidanmackeyhealth.com, and those would be the two main places. So that would be thanks for that opportunity. But yeah, this has been great. I've been exceptionally nervous trying to think on the spot. It's not my forte, but thanks very much.
Yeah. No worries at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. Yeah, like I say, I think, when it comes to nutrition, especially, I think over the last year or so, without gyms being open and that sort of stuff, I think a little bit more, I know I've had to adapt and change to the coaching style, and how you work with clients, that you can't track. You can sometimes fall back on, oh well, actually, your deadlift's going up, so things must be going well. But especially with a lot of people having more time, with a lot more people working from home and that sort of stuff, I think people have a lot more time to think about food, and sometimes get in their own head a little bit. And it's just making sure that there is a plan there, like what we spoke about, and going forward. So yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.
Thanks, Stephen.